What happens when a group of fake HOA cops try to intimidate an old woman living on a ranch? They thought she was defenseless until she reached for the same 1945 Colt that's been in her family for generations. What came next left them crying, crawling, and begging for mercy. Grandma June wasn't just any grandma. At 78, she still walked her ranch every morning, fed her chickens, and polished the same Colt 45 her father had carried back in 1945. Folks around the county respected her. Tough, fair, and sharper than most lawyers in town. But HOA Karen hated her. Karen had been trying to rope June's land into her HOA for years. The wide pastures, the lakefront, the perfect view, all of it screamed profit to Karen. And when June refused to sign her voluntary compliance papers, Karen decided intimidation was the only way forward. That's when the fake cops showed up. It was 7 p.m., just as the sun dipped low. June had finished her evening tea when she heard the crunch of tires on gravel. A black SUV pulled up to her gate, lights flashing red and blue. Cheap knockoff strobes anyone could buy online. 4 men stepped out. Black uniforms, no badges. One of them banged on the gate. "Ma'am, open up. HOA police business." June squinted from her porch, unimpressed. "HOA police? That's not a thing. Who sent you?" The tallest one sneered. "We've had reports you're violating code. Unapproved fencing, unauthorized livestock. We need to inspect the property. Open the gate." June just chuckled. "Son, this is a ranch, not some cookie-cutter subdivision. And unless you've got a real badge, you're trespassing." The men didn't back down. One pulled bolt cutters from the SUV. Another started climbing the fence. That's when June stood up. She walked inside calmly, opened her cedar chest, and pulled out the Colt 45. The steel gleamed in the fading light, every inch oiled and polished. She loaded 6 rounds with the same care she used to can peaches. When she stepped back outside, the cops had already broken the gate and were stomping onto her land. "Final warning," June said, voice steady as stone. "Turn around and leave." They laughed. One called her grandma with a toy. The next sound they heard was the crack of a 45 round splitting the air. June had fired a warning shot straight into the dirt, close enough to dust exploded at their boots. The laughter stopped. "You crazy old..." But one started, but June cocked the hammer back again, eyes never blinking. Next one's not a warning. The men froze. One slowly raised his hands. Another backed toward the SUV. But the leader growled, "She'll not shoot. She's bluffing," and took another step forward. Bang! This time, June aimed at the hood of their SUV. The round tore clean through the metal, smoke rising from the fresh hole. The cops scattered. 2 tripped over each other, diving back into the vehicle. Another sprinted for the road, yelling. June stood tall, Colt steady in her grip. "Tell your boss Karen if she wants a fight, she better bring more than Halloween costumes and dollar store sirens." By the time the sheriff arrived, called by neighbors who heard the shots, the fake cops were long gone. But June had everything on camera. The busted gate, the SUV plate, the faces of every single imposter. Sheriff Daniels whistled low as he reviewed the footage. "June, you just saved us a lot of trouble. These boys aren't cops. They've been pulling stunts in 3 counties. Karen's name shows up in their pay logs, too. You just handed us the case we needed." June smiled faintly. "Told you boys years ago, Karen's greed was going to get her burned. And this time, it was only the beginning." The sheriff's cruiser lights faded into the night as the last witness statements were taken. Grandma June returned to her porch, Colt still warm from the action. For a moment, she let the weight of it settle, not just the revolver, but the memories. Her father had carried that same Colt through Europe in '45. It had protected him then, and now, decades later, it protected her. But June knew this wasn't the end. Karen wasn't the type to slink away quietly. The very next morning, a shiny Lexus rolled up to June's ranch. Out stepped Karen herself. teal blazer, clipboard, sunglasses bigger than her face. She didn't come alone. Behind her were 3 burly men in suits, trying their best to look like bodyguards, but more like hired muscle. Karen smiled like a snake. "June, dear, that little stunt you pulled last night, big mistake. You fired a weapon on HOA security officers. I could have you jailed for assault." June leaned against the porch railing, unimpressed. "Those weren't security officers. They were thugs with Halloween lights, and I have the sheriff's report to prove it." She waved a manipulated hand dismissively. "Reports can be changed. Judges can be convinced. I've run this HOA for 15 years. Do you think anyone in this county will take your word over mine?" June's eyes narrowed. "Try me." The muscle stepped forward like they were about to storm the porch, but June's mastiff, Duke, growled low from under the rocking chair. His teeth gleamed like ivory knives. The men froze. Karen's smile faltered. "Fine. You want war? You've got one." She spun on her heel, heels crunching in the gravel, and the Lexus disappeared in a cloud of dust. Within a week, June was served papers. Karen was suing her for endangerment, illegal discharge of a firearm, and absurdly, refusal to comply with HOA codes. June laughed when she read it. Refusal to comply with HOA codes? On a ranch built in 1923? But her grandson Michael didn't laugh. A former JAG officer turned defense attorney, he knew how dangerous Karen could be in court. "Grandma, don't underestimate her. HOA boards have money. Money buys lawyers. But don't worry, we'll fight this, and we'll fight dirty if we have to." The trial became the talk of the county. On one side, Karen, draped in designer suits, flanked by her HOA board, acting like royalty. On the other, Grandma June, boots dusty from feeding chickens, Colt holstered at her hip just to make a point. The judge raised an eyebrow at the firearm but said nothing. Everyone knew June's reputation. Karen's lawyer launched into a speech about reckless endangerment and violent vigilante justice. He painted June as a dangerous old woman living in the past. But Michael countered with cold, hard evidence. Security footage of the fake cops breaking the gate, audio recordings of them threatening June. The sheriff himself testified, "Mrs. June acted in self-defense. Frankly, she probably saved us from worse crimes down the line." The jury didn't even need a recess. They ruled in June's favor. Karen's lawsuit crumbled, and instead she was slapped with charges of hiring impersonators and attempted trespass. But Karen wasn't finished yet. 2 nights later, just past midnight, June heard engines rumbling again. This time not one SUV, but 3. Headlights cut through the darkness as dozen men in black poured out. Some carried bats, others crowbars. At their head stood Karen, fury burning in her eyes. "This is your last chance, June. Sign over the land or we tear it apart, piece by piece." June didn't panic. She walked inside and picked up the old rotary phone. She didn't call 911, she called Michael. Within 10 minutes, headlights appeared from the opposite hill. Not SUVs this time, Humvees. Out stepped Michael with 5 of his buddies from his army days, all vets, all armed. The night turned silent. Karen's men shifted uneasily. Michael's vets boomed across the field. "Ma'am, you made a mistake. This isn't an old lady's porch you're storming. This is family, and family doesn't scare easy." June stepped forward, Colt raised, steady as stone. "Boys," she said to Michael's team, "don't fire unless fired upon. But if they so much as twitch wrong, you drop 'em." The standoff felt like a western. Dust swirled under the moonlight, engines idling, fists tightening on weapons. Karen screamed, "Get her!" Her men charged. The next 30 seconds were chaos. Michael's vets moved like a machine, disarming, tackling, dropping 3 men before they could even swing. Duke lunged at another, dragging him into the dirt. And then there was June. She fired into the air, the thunder of the Colt freezing the entire scene. 1 round, and suddenly, Karen's army remembered they weren't soldiers. They broke. One by one, the fake enforcers scrambled back to their SUVs, engines roaring as they fled into the night. Karen stood alone, shaking with rage. "This isn't over!" she screamed, but her voice cracked. June lowered the Colt, eyes cold as winter. "Oh, honey, it's been over since the second you set foot on my land." The sheriff arrested Karen the next morning, charges ranging from fraud to conspiracy. Her HOA empire collapsed within weeks. Investors pulled out, homeowners sued, and without Karen's iron grip, the entire subdivision voted to dissolve the HOA completely. June became a local legend. Folks started calling her the Iron Widow of Willow Creek. Kids biked by a ranch just to catch a glimpse of her sitting on the porch, Colt by her side, Duke at her feet. But to June, it wasn't about legend. It was about peace. Her ranch
stayed hers. Her family stayed safe. And that old 1945 Colt stayed ready. A reminder that sometimes history protects the present. And Karen? Well, last anyone saw, she was selling knockoff jewelry at a flea market 3 counties over. Justice served.